everyone. I am so excited that it is finally raspberry season and our raspberry bushes are just completely loaded with red, ripe, delicious raspberries. And the season only lasts about 2 weeks, so I'm trying to take full advantage while everything is ripening. I think one of the reasons that we have such an amazing batch of raspberries this year is that in this spring I pruned all of the dead stalks back and removed a lot of the suckers and shared them with neighbors, and I think that just forced a lot of energy to go into actually producing fruit this year, and I'm so glad that we did that because we are going to have so many raspberries to use this fall and winter. The rest of the garden has been looking really great this year, and we have had just so many bumblebees come and visit all of our flowers. They were definitely the main pollinator for all of our raspberry plants. I like to give our raspberries a wash with mostly water and a splash of vinegar just to make sure that everything is kind of off of it, that it can be, and they're just the cleanest they can be. And then after eating our massive fill of raspberries, as many as we can manage, I'm trying really hard to use them in our baking. So I made these scones and they were just absolutely amazing that I needed to share them with you. My mom has been making blueberry scones for years, as long as I can remember, and this is the recipe for her blueberry scones. I just switched them out with raspberries. I will include the recipe in the description box in this video so that you can follow along and make these yourself. They were fairly simple to make. They do look a little funky and when you're kind of trying to build them together once you add the raspberries, but they held their shape once they were baked and turned out so amazing and delicious. This recipe pairs wonderfully with a cream cheese frosting, which I will also include down below. I did have to use my hands a lot more for this recipe than I was kind of anticipating. Usually I can get away with using my mixer for most things, but the dough just wasn't really coming together in our mixer, so I did end up mixing it by hand, which is perfectly fine. It turned out so beautifully, and I think that there's a lot of different variations that you could use for this scone recipe. You don't want to overmix, which I might have a little bit, just trying to incorporate all the flour into it. But my mom, for the 4th of July, put strawberries and blueberries in a scone, and that was amazing. And I feel like you really could switch it up and use this as kind of a base recipe for a lot of different inclusions. The other recipes that I have been experimenting with this raspberry season are kind of including them in drinks. So I've been trying to find a drink that I like that's kind of like a mocktail, something refreshing. So far, I've really liked just squishing some raspberries up and pouring some lemonade over the top. Otherwise, raspberry tea would be really great. Or I tried some creamsicle one that just wasn't quite right, so I don't want to share that recipe quite yet. But we'll work on it, and maybe next year I'll have it down. The other thing that I did make that was pretty tasty were some raspberry blondies, and I wish I had saved the recipe, but it was white chocolate chips in a blondie with some raspberries squished up into it, and those did turn out really tasty and delicious. If you do decide to make these scones, this is kind of the step where I was starting to doubt whether or not it would come together, but I kind of just pressed them together. It was very squishy, but I persevered through and just kind of tried to keep them together as best I could, and they really kind of came together once they were in the oven. I still have a little bit of raspberry season left, so I'm curious if you guys have a favorite raspberry recipe that you really like. I would love to give it a try. Otherwise, my toddler is perfectly happy eating all of the raspberries fresh off of the plant. It has been one of his favorite things. The other day, he said, "Thank you, Mama, for growing raspberries for me," and it about melted my heart, especially because we were having a difficult day at that moment, and so that was definitely the turnaround I needed. For the raspberries that we don't get eaten in time, I am going to be freezing these. I like to do a little pre-freeze first on a cookie sheet with with a silicone mat, and then throw them in a bag. And I will include a link to this video. This is my jam recipe for raspberries, and it turned out amazing. It doesn't have any pectin. I don't like to can until the fall or winter when I feel comfortable running my stove for several hours at a time, because it does take a while to can these up. But I don't really feel like running my stove in the summertime for that long, so this is a perfect fall winter activity, and this was such a fun project, and we still have a few cans left, but we're definitely starting to get low, so I'm glad that raspberry season is now here and we can start that again. Here I'm just making some of that cream cheese frosting. Letting your butter and cream cheese get to room temperature is definitely the key to making this recipe come together a little bit better. I think the recipe calls for about 4 cups of powdered sugar. I think I used about 2.5, maybe 3 cups. Definitely only made it about half as sweet, and so you can kind of, change that to your preference if you would like. The scones also burned a little bit on the bottom where the raspberries were touching it, so I think next time I would probably try to include some parchment paper on my cookie sheet, but otherwise, these are amazing. I loved having these for breakfast, and it's just such a great way to kind of live seasonally and enjoy what's growing in your garden right now. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.